They say 50 is the new 30. Whoever they are, they've never been married to Marcus Sterling for 22 years. At 48, I didn't feel old. I felt used, like a favorite sweater that had been washed too many times, losing its shape, ready to be relegated to the back of the closet. I was standing in the center of our sprawling minimalist living room in downtown Chicago, holding a tray of Marcus's favorite single malt scotch glasses. The room was pristine. White leather sofas, chrome accents, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. It was a showroom, not a home, and I was the curator. Marcus was late. Again. It was the night of the Sterling Corp annual gala. The company his father, Arthur, had built from the ground up, and the company Marcus was currently running into the ground, though he'd never admit it. I had spent the day soothing investors on the phone, finalizing the seating charts to avoid World War III between board members, and making sure Marcus's tuxedo was pressed to perfection. The invisible work. The work that kept the Sterling Empire looking shiny from the outside. The elevator dinged directly into the penthouse foyer. Marcus walked in, throwing his cashmere coat onto the entry bench without looking. "Scotch, Eleanor. Neat. It's been a hell of a day," he barked, loosening his tie. He didn't look at me. He rarely looked at me anymore. He looked through me. "Dinner is ready if you want a quick bite before we change," I said, pouring the amber liquid. "Salmon and asparagus. No carbs? Good girl." He took the glass, downed half of it in one gulp, and finally glanced my way. His eyes, once the bluest I'd ever seen, scanned me critically. "You're wearing that tonight?" I looked down at my dress. It was an elegant charcoal silk gown. Tasteful. Expensive. "Yes. Is something wrong with it?" He sighed, a puff of impatient air through his nose. "It's just very matronly, Eleanor. Very mother of the bride. We need energy tonight. Youth. Vitality. The investors are getting nervous about Dad's health." My stomach tightened. His father, Arthur, was in hospice care. He was the only family I truly loved. While Marcus saw his father's decline as an inconvenience to the stock price, I saw the loss of a mentor and a friend. "Marcus, I'm 48. I'm not going to wear a sequined mini dress." He gave a short, cruel chuckle. "Don't worry, Ellie. Nobody expects you to be a cheerleader anymore. Just try not to look so tired." He walked past me toward the master bedroom suite. "Oh, by the way, my new executive assistant, Tiffany, will be there tonight. Make sure she's seated at the main table. She's been invaluable lately." Tiffany. The name landed in the room like a dead bird. I hadn't met her yet, but I knew the type. Marcus went through assistants every 18 months. They got younger and blonde with every rotation. I didn't know it yet, but Tiffany wasn't just the new rotation. She was the replacement. Chapter 2. The 20-year gap. The gala was a blur of fake smiles and air kisses. I played my part. The supportive, stable wife. The anchor. Marcus, however, was soaring. And Tiffany was the wind beneath his wings. She was stunning. I had to give her that. 22 years old, fresh out of business school, with hair the color of spun gold and a body that defying gravity in a crimson dress that was barely legal. Throughout dinner, Marcus barely spoke to me. His entire body was angled toward Tiffany, who sat on his other side. He laughed too loudly at her jokes. He touched her arm to emphasize points about synergy and Q4 goals. I sat there, surrounded by people I'd known for 2 decades, feeling utterly invisible. I saw the pitying glances from the other wives. They knew. They always knew before the wife did. The bomb dropped 3 days later. It was a Sunday morning. I was drinking coffee, reading the paper, enjoying the quiet before Marcus woke up and turned the condo into a whirlwind of chaotic energy. He walked into the kitchen fully dressed. Suit, tie, Rolex. On a Sunday. "We need to talk," he said, the 4 words that end worlds. He didn't sit down. He stood by the island, gripping the marble edge, looking uncomfortable for the first time in years. "I'm leaving, Eleanor." I slowly lowered my coffee cup, clattered against the saucer. "Leaving? For a business trip?" "No, I'm leaving you. I want a divorce." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the beat of my own heart hammering against my ribs. Is it? I couldn't even say her name. Is it the assistant? Marcus had the grace to look momentarily sheepish, but it quickly was replaced by his usual arrogance. Tiffany. Yes. We're in love, Eleanor. It happened fast, but it's real. It's the most real thing I've felt in years. Real. My voice was a whisper. 22 years, Marcus. We built this life together. I supported you when your first venture failed. I nursed your ego when your father promoted Jenkins over you. I've been here for everything. And then he said it, the line that would haunt my nightmares for months. He looked at me, his expression devoid of warmth, almost clinical. Look, Eleanor, let's be honest. We've run our course. You're a wonderful woman. Really? Sensible. Reliable. He paused, searching for the word that wouldn't sound too brutal and failing. But let's face it, your old charity work. Tiffany is a tech IPO. Your comfortable shoes. Tiffany is a pair of Louboutins. He shrugged, as if this explained everything. I need a fresh start, Ellie. The company needs a fresh face. Dad is dying, and when I take over, I need energy beside me. Not history. Comfortable shoes. I stood up, my legs shaking. Get out, I said. Actually, he said, pulling a sleek black envelope from his inner pocket and sliding it across the island. This is my apartment. It was purchased before the marriage. My lawyers drafted a generous separation agreement. You'll be comfortable. You have until Friday to move your things out. He checked his watch. I have brunch with Tiffany. The movers can handle the heavy stuff. He turned on his heel and walked out of the life we had built, leaving me alone in a multi-million-dollar apartment that suddenly felt like a morgue. Chapter 3: The Discard Pile. The next month was a humiliation conga line. Marcus didn't just leave. He erased me. He moved Tiffany into our condo before my side of the closet was even fully empty. I had to move into a cramped one-bedroom apartment across town. A depressing little box that smelled faintly of cabbage and desperation. It was all I could afford until the divorce settlement was finalized, as Marcus had frozen our joint accounts to prevent vindictive spending. Every time I opened social media, there they were. Marcus and Tiffany on a yacht in Cabo. Marcus and Tiffany at the opera, with her wearing diamonds that I recognized as family heirlooms Arthur had given me. They were the golden couple of Chicago business. The narrative was spun perfectly in the press. The dynamic new CEO and his brilliant young partner, ushering in a new era for Sterling Corporation. I was the dowdy ex-wife, the relic of the past, conveniently forgotten. I felt hollowed out. I was 48, unemployed, having spent 2 decades being an unpaid corporate wife, and living in a place where I could touch opposite walls at the same time. The only light in my life was Arthur. I visited him at the hospice center every other day. He was frail, his once booming voice reduced to a raspy whisper, but his mind was still sharp as a tack. "Where's that son of mine?" Arthur growled one rainy Tuesday, sipping the broth I'd brought him. "He's busy, Arthur. You know how he gets." I lied, fluffing his pillows. Arthur grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. His watery blue eyes locked onto mine. "He left you, didn't he? For the blonde piece of fluff." I felt tears prick my eyes. I nodded, unable to speak. Arthur let out a rattling sigh that turned into a cough. "Damn fool. Always chasing shiny objects. He doesn't know the value of gold until he's traded it for pyrite." He pulled me closer. "Listen to me, Ellie. You were the best thing that ever happened to that boy. You were the only reason I let him near the C-suite. I knew you were in the background, keeping him from driving the whole thing off a cliff. I tried, Arthur. I really tried. I know you did, my dear. I saw it all." He leaned back, exhausted. A strange, knowing smile played on his thin lips. "Don't you worry about Marcus. He's going to get exactly what he deserves. Karma is a slow driver, Ellie, but she never misses an appointment." I thought he was just comforting me. I didn't know he had already set the GPS. Chapter 4: The Final Show. Arthur died 3 weeks later. The funeral was a circus. It was less about grieving a titan of industry and more about Marcus's coronation. It was held at the largest cathedral in the city. I sat in the 5th row, amidst the distant relatives and former associates. Marcus sat in the front row, head bowed in performative grief. Next to him sat Tiffany. If I thought her dress at the gala was inappropriate, her funeral attire was a declaration of war. It was black, yes, but it was skin-tight, cleavage-bearing, and paired with a fascinator hat so large it looked like a satellite dish. She spent the entire service checking her phone beneath her purse. Marcus delivered the eulogy. It was a masterpiece of narcissism. He spoke for 20 minutes and managed to make his father's death entirely about himself. "My father built the foundation," Marcus boomed from the pulpit, looking impossibly handsome in his Italian suit. "But it is up to the new generation to build the skyscraper. I promise you, Dad, I will take Sterling Corp to heights you never imagined. With the right partner by my side, we are unstoppable." He gestured toward Tiffany, who gave a little wave like she was on a parade float. I felt sick. Arthur despised vanity. He would have hated this. After the service, as the casket was being loaded into the hearse, Marcus cornered me near the side entrance of the church. Tiffany was hanging off his arm, looking bored. "Eleanor," he said, his tone brisk and businesslike. "Look, the reading of the will is tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at Old Man Hemlock's office." "I'll be there," I said quietly. Tiffany popped her gum. "Is it really necessary for her to come, Mark? It's going to be super awkward. Can't you just mail her a check for whatever pittance Arthur left her?" Marcus squeezed her arm. "Babe, it's formalities. Dad was old-fashioned. He probably left her his collection of antique, depressing Russian literature or something. We have to indulge it." He turned back to me, his eyes cold. "Just get there on time, Eleanor, and try not to make a scene. This is a big day for me. It's the day it all finally becomes officially mine." He checked his reflection in the tinted window of the limousine waiting for them. It's the start of the golden age. I watched them drive away. I had lost my husband, my home, my dignity, and now the only father figure I'd ever known. I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I put on my best remaining suit, a navy Chanel that Marcus hated because it covered my knees, and took a bus to the law offices of Hemlock and Associates. The waiting room was thick with tension. Marcus sat scrolling through emails on his phone, radiating impatience. Tiffany was loudly complaining to a receptionist about the lack of oat milk for coffee. When I walked in, Marcus glanced up. "You look tired, Eleanor. You really should take better care of yourself now that you're on your own. Save the advice for your portfolio, Marcus," I said, taking a seat on the opposite side of the room. Before he could retort, the heavy mahogany door opened. Mr. Hemlock, Arthur's ancient, stoic lawyer who looked like he had been carved from granite, stepped out. He wore a bow tie and an expression that gave absolutely nothing away. "Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling." He nodded to me, ignoring Tiffany entirely. "Please come in. We have a lot to discuss." Marcus jumped up, grabbing Tiffany's hand. "Finally, let's get this over with. I have a company to run." He strode into the office like he already owned the building. I followed behind, feeling like a ghost attending my own execution. I had no idea that in that office, the ghost was about to be handed a loaded gun.mr. Hemlock's office smelled of old leather, pipe tobacco, and 50 years of quiet judgments. It was a room designed to make you feel small. The wainscoting was dark walnut, the windows were narrow, and the only sound was the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner that sounded like a slow heartbeat. Marcus naturally hated it. "First order of business when I take over the estate," Marcus announced, draping his arm over the back of Tiffany's chair, "is gutting this place. Smells like a mausoleum in here, Hemlock. We need glass walls, open concept, sunlight." Mr. Hemlock sat behind an enormous desk that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a galleon. He adjusted his spectacles slowly. "Arthur liked this office, Mr. Sterling. He found it grounding. Arthur is dead. Marcus said cruelly. Time to move on. I sat in a wingback chair in the corner, clutching my purse. I felt like an intruder in a family drama that no longer included me. I just wanted this over with so I could go back to my tiny apartment and figure out how to restart my life at 48. Can we hurry this up? Tiffany popped her gum loudly, scrolling through Instagram on her phone. We have a lunch reservation at Nobu at 12:30. Mr. Hemlock looked at Tiffany over the rim of his glasses. It was the look an entomologist might give a particularly uninteresting beetle. Miss Davies, Hemlock said, his voice like dry leaves skittering on pavement. You are not named in this will. Your presence here is a courtesy extended only because Mr. Sterling insisted. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Whatever. I'm his future wife. What's his is mine, right, babe? Marcus squeezed her shoulder. Exactly. Carry on, Hemlock. Read the boilerplate. Let's get to the numbers. Mr. Hemlock opened a thick leather portfolio. He didn't produce a paper document. Instead, he pulled out a sleek silver tablet. Arthur Sterling updated his last will and testament 6 weeks ago, Hemlock said calmly. Marcus frowned. 6 weeks? He was on heavy pain meds then. He wasn't thinking straight. On the contrary, Hemlock said. He was exceptionally lucid. Dr. Albright certified his competency before the signing. And because Arthur anticipated resistance, he chose to deliver the primary message himself. Hemlock tapped the tablet. A large screen built into the bookshelf opposite us flickered to life. Marcus sat up straighter. A video will? God. Dad always did love the dramatics. He smirked at Tiffany. Probably recorded a final speech about how proud he is of me taking the reins. The screen stabilized. It was Arthur. He was sitting in his favorite armchair in the hospice room, wearing his old cashmere cardigan. He looked frail, the skin stretched tight over his cheekbones, but his eyes, those piercing blue eyes that Marcus had inherited, were sharp fire. I gasped softly. It was painful to see him so alive just days before the end. Hello, Marcus, the video Arthur said. His voice was raspy, but steady. Marcus smiled at the screen. Hey, Dad. If you're watching this, I'm gone. And knowing you, you're probably sitting in Hemlock's office right now, checking your watch, annoyed that my death is inconveniencing your lunch schedule. Marcus's smile faltered slightly. Tiffany giggled. You're also probably sitting next to your new assistant, the blonde one. What's her name? Brittany? Tiffany? Arthur leaned into the camera. The look on his face was one of profound disappointment. I know everything, Marcus. I know you've been sleeping with her for 6 months. I know you bought her a diamond bracelet using the company emergency fund. I know you moved her into the penthouse before Eleanor's side of the bed was even cold. The room froze. Marcus went pale. How did he know that? Who told him? He glared at me. Did you run crying to him? I shook my head, stunned. I never told him about Tiffany. I didn't want to upset him. Eleanor didn't tell me, video Arthur continued, as if reading Marcus's mind. I still have friends in that building, son. Doormen see everything. You were sloppy, arrogant, just like you've been with the company. Arthur started coughing. He took a sip of water, his hand trembling. When he looked back at the camera, the sadness in his eyes was replaced by cold fury. You think I don't know about the Project Hydra disaster? You lost $40 million on a gamble I explicitly told you not to take. You've been hiding the losses in shell accounts, hoping to fix it before I died. You're not a CEO, Marcus. You're a child playing with matches in a dynamite factory. You're going to destroy everything I built in 5 years. Marcus stood up. This is bull. Turn it off. Hemlock. He was delirious. These are lies. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, Hemlock barked. It was the loudest I'd ever heard him speak. The authority in his voice was absolute. Marcus, shocked, sat back down. I built Sterling Corp for 70 years, Arthur rasped. It stands for integrity, stability. You have neither. You traded a woman of gold for a piece of costume jewelry because you're terrified of getting old. You're pathetic, Marcus. Tiffany bristled. Excuse me? Costume jewelry? Who does this old cadaver think he is? So, Arthur said, leaning back, exhausted by the effort. Here is the disposition of my estate. Hemlock read the clauses. The screen went black. Chapter 6. The clause. The silence in the room was suffocating. The only sound was Marcus's heavy breathing. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. He didn't mean that, Marcus whispered, more to himself than anyone else. He was sick. He was angry I didn't visit more. It's just old man rambling. Mr. Hemlock pushed his glasses up his nose and began to read from the tablet. Article 1. To the various charities listed in Addendum A, including the Chicago Arts Fund and St. Jude's Hospital, I bequeath the sum of $50 million. Marcus waved his hand impatiently. Fine, the tax write-offs. Get to the main estate, the controlling shares, the real estate portfolio. Hemlock continued. Article 2. To my son, Marcus Arthur Sterling. Marcus sat forward, gripping the arms of his chair. This was it. The coronation. I bequeath the sum of $500,000 per year, paid out in monthly installments via a trust managed by this firm. Marcus blinked. 500. What? That's a joke, right? That barely covers my mortgage and my club fees. Where's the rest of the cash? Where are the billions, Hemlock? There are conditions attached to this stipend. Hemlock read on, his voice monotone. This allowance is contingent upon Marcus Sterling remaining employed at Sterling Corp in a capacity deemed useful by the board of directors and maintaining a lifestyle free of public scandal that could damage the company reputation. Furthermore, should he marry Miss Tiffany Davies within 5 years of my death, this stipend is revoked entirely. What? Tiffany shrieked, jumping to her feet. He can't do that. That's controlling from the grave. That's illegal. Marcus looked faint. 500,000? That's nothing. Hemlock, where are the shares? The 60% controlling interest in Sterling Corporation. That's the only thing that matters. Dad promised me the chair. Hemlock looked up from the tablet. His expression softened slightly, but not for Marcus. He looked past him, directly at me in the corner. We now come to Article 3, Hemlock said quietly. The disposition of the remainder of the estate, including the penthouse property downtown, the Hamptons estate, the entire investment portfolio, and the 60% controlling class a voting stock of Sterling Corporation. Marcus let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. Okay, here we go. Finally. Jesus. Dad really wanted to make me sweat for it. He straightened his tie, regaining some of his composure. All right, lay it on me. I'm ready to sign. Mr. Hemlock didn't look at the tablet. He took off his glasses and set them gently on the desk. He folded his hands. He looked directly at Marcus, whose smug smile was just beginning to return. You seem to be laboring under a misapprehension, Mr. Sterling, Hemlock said. What are you talking about? Marcus demanded. Hemlock gestured toward the corner where I sat, frozen, my heart pounding against my ribs. Arthur didn't leave the company to you, Marcus. Hemlock paused, letting the words hang in the air like an executioner's axe. He left it to the only person he trusted to save it from you. Marcus turned slowly to look at me. His eyes were wide with confusion, then disbelief, and finally, dawning horror. Eleanor, he whispered. But we're getting divorced. I fired her as my wife. The divorce is not finalized, Hemlock said crisply. And Arthur's will is quite specific. He admired Eleanor's loyalty, her intelligence, and her patience in dealing with difficult assets. Hemlock picked up the tablet again and looked at Marcus, delivering the final blow. The penthouse, the money, and the controlling interest in the company where you are currently employed. She gets everything. Chapter 7, The Shift. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. She gets everything. Marcus began to make a noise that wasn't quite human. It was a high-pitched wheeze of denial. No, this is a joke. A sick joke. You forged this, Hemlock. You and this vindictive bitch cooked this up. He lunged toward the desk. "Sit down, Marcus." Hemlock boomed, slamming his hand on the mahogany desk with a sound like a gunshot. "Or I will have security remove you. This will is ironclad. Arthur spent the last month of his life ensuring you couldn't wiggle out of it." Tiffany grabbed Marcus's arm, her face a mask of panic. "Marcus, what does this mean? If she gets everything, what do we get?" Marcus looked at her, his face gray. The golden boy, the titan of industry, looked suddenly very small and very old. "We get fired," he muttered. He turned to me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by raw, naked terror. "Eleanor," he pleaded, his voice shaking. "Ellie, you can't let him do this. You don't know how to run a multinational conglomerate. You plan dinner parties. You arrange flowers." I slowly stood up. My legs, which had been shaking minutes ago, were suddenly steady. I looked around the mahogany office. It didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt like a command center. I looked at Marcus. For the first time in 22 years, I didn't see the man I was trying to please. I saw a frantic, drowning man trying to pull me under with him. I remembered Arthur's words in the hospice. "Karma never misses an appointment." "You're right, Marcus," I said, my voice surprisingly calm in the quiet room. "I don't know how to be a CEO of a modern company." I walked over to Hemlock's desk. I didn't look at Marcus. I looked at the tablet, at the legal language that gave me back my life and then some. I picked up the stylus Hemlock offered me. "But," I continued, signing my name on the digital line, "I am a very quick learner, and I know exactly who I'm going to fire first." The air in Mr. Hemlock's office had changed. It no longer felt like a place of judgment. It felt like a vacuum where all the oxygen had been sucked out, leaving only panic. I stood by the desk, the digital stylus still in my hand, feeling a strange cocktail of terror and absolute clarity. I had signed the document. I was now the majority shareholder of a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. I owned the building we were standing in. I owned the chair Marcus was slumped in. Marcus stared at me, his face a mask of pale grayish putty. The arrogance, the swagger, the midlife upgrade energy. It had all evaporated, leaving behind a frightened middle-aged man terrified of losing his toys. "Eleanor," he croaked, trying for a charming smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. "Ellie, sweetheart, let's all just take a breath, okay?" He stood up slowly, approaching me with his hands raised in a placating gesture, as if approaching a wild animal he'd accidentally cornered. Dad was angry." Marcus smoothed his silk tie with trembling hands. "He didn't mean for this to happen. You know that. You can't run Sterling Corporation. The wolves on Wall Street will eat you alive by lunchtime." He reached out to touch my arm. I took a half step back. His hand dropped. "Look," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We can fix this. We're still married, right? We're a team. We've always been a team. You hated the paperwork. Remember? You hate conflict. Just sign power of attorney over to me. I'll handle the board. I'll deal with the mess. And you can go back to the Hamptons house and relax. You'll never have to worry about money again." It was breathtaking. Even now, facing total ruin, he thought he could manipulate me with the promise of being allowed to live in my own house. Before I could answer, a sharp, bitter laugh cut through the room. We both turned to Tiffany. She was standing by the window, looking at her phone. She wasn't crying. She looked furious. "Are you kidding me right now?" Tiffany snapped, glaring at Marcus. "You told me you were worth $300 million minimum. You told me you were the CEO. Tiffany, babe, calm down," Marcus pleaded, sweating now. "It's a temporary setback. We just need to maneuver." "Maneuver what, Marcus?" She waved her phone at him. "I just Googled the stipulations of that stipend." Hemlock read. 500 grand a year? Before taxes? That's like upper management money. That's not private jet money." She looked him up and down, and the disgust on her young, flawless face was lethal. "You're broke," she stated flatly. "You're a 48-year-old junior executive on an allowance from his daddy's estate. which is now controlled by your ex-wife. Tiffany, I love you, Marcus murmured, sounding pathetic even to his own ears. Yeah, well, I love the lifestyle, she retorted, grabbing her designer purse. A purse I had technically paid for. And if you think I'm going to stick around to fly coach and shop at outlet malls while you beg her. She jerked a thumb at me. For pocket money, you're delusional. I'm 22, Marcus. I have options. She didn't even say goodbye. She just walked out the door, the click-clack of her red-bottomed heels sounding like nail gun fire driving the final coffin nails into Marcus's ego. Marcus watched the door close, his jaw slack. The fresh face, the energy he needed, had lasted exactly 4 minutes past the money running out. He turned back to me, his eyes wet with self-pity. Ellie, she left me. After everything I sacrificed. I looked at him, really looked at him. For 22 years, I had organized my entire life around making this man happy, shielding him from consequence, polishing his image. I thought I loved him, but looking at the shivering wreck before me, I realized I hadn't loved him for a long time. I had just been managing him. Arthur was right, I said softly. You traded gold for pyrite, Marcus, and now you have neither. I turned to Mr. Hemlock, who had watched the entire exchange with the impassive demeanor of a sphinx. Mr. Hemlock, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What is the first step? Hemlock stood up, a small, genuine smile touching his thin lips. The first step, Mrs. Sterling, is securing your assets. I have taken the liberty of contacting the head of security at the penthouse. They are awaiting your arrival. Chapter 9, The Eviction. Returning to the penthouse 2 hours later felt less like a homecoming and more like a crime scene investigation. I didn't go alone. Hemlock insisted I take 2 large, silent security guards from Sterling Corporation. When the private elevator doors opened into the foyer, the smell hit me first. Cheap, cloying perfume trying to mask the smell of marijuana smoke. The pristine white minimalist showroom I had maintained was trashed. Clothes were flung over the expensive sofas. Takeout containers littered the marble kitchen island where Marcus had told me he was leaving me. Marcus was already there, frantically shoving clothes into a Louis Vuitton duffel bag in the master bedroom. When he saw me in the doorway, flanked by security, he froze. What are you doing here? He demanded, trying to regain some shred of authority. This is still my home until the divorce. Actually, it isn't, I said, stepping inside. It felt strange to wear shoes in the house, a rule I had strictly enforced, which Marcus had immediately broken. The deed was in the trust. The trust is now mine. You are trespassing. I nodded to the guards. Please escort Mr. Sterling off the premises. He can take 1 bag of personal items. The rest will be inventoried. You can't do this, Marcus shouted as the guards moved forward, large hands gripping his arms. Eleanor, be reasonable. Where am I supposed to go? I looked around the rec department. I saw a framed photo of Marcus and Tiffany on the nightstand where my wedding picture used to be. I believe there's a lovely extended stay America near the airport, Marcus, I said coldly. They have kitchenettes. It will be a fresh start for you. They dragged him out, still protesting. When the elevator doors closed, silence fell over the penthouse. I walked into the massive walk-in closet. My side was empty. His side was full of suits I had picked out for him. Then I saw it. In the corner, shoved casually on a shelf next to Tiffany's discarded yoga pants. Pair of old, well-worn loafers. My gardening shoes. The comfortable shoes he had mocked me for being. I picked them up. They were muddy, scuffed, and sturdy. They had supported me through years of hard work. I sat down on the floor of the closet and finally, for the first time since Arthur died, I cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of sheer, exhausting relief. Chapter 10. The View from the Top. The next morning, I didn't go to the penthouse kitchen to make green smoothies for an ungrateful husband. I put on a charcoal gray power suit, one that didn't look matronly at all, and took the company car to Sterling Tower. I was terrified. My hands were shaking so badly in the back of the car I had to sit on them. I knew how to host a dinner party for 50 diplomats, I didn't know how to run a board meeting. Mr. Hemlock met me in the lobby. He seemed to sense my panic. Arthur didn't choose you because you know tax law, Eleanor, he murmured as we approached the private elevator banks. He chose you because you have a moral compass. Marcus lost his years ago. You can hire people to do the math. You can't hire integrity. The elevator opened onto the top floor, the C-suite, the holy of holies. The executive assistants barely looked up. They were used to Marcus breezing through. Where is he? I asked the head secretary, a formidable woman named Mrs. Gable who had been with Arthur for 30 years and hated Marcus with a passion. She looked up, surprised to see me. Mr. Sterling is in his office, Mrs. Sterling. He's quite agitated today. He's demanding to see legal counsel. Thank you, Mrs. Gable, I said. Please inform the board of directors that an emergency meeting is called for 12 noon. Attendance is mandatory. Mrs. Gable's eyebrows shot up. Who is calling the meeting, ma'am? The chairwoman, I said. I walked toward the massive double doors of the CEO's office, Arthur's old office. I didn't knock. I opened the doors and walked in. Marcus was behind the massive desk, surrounded by piles of shredded paper. The room smelled of fear and day-old scotch. He looked up, his eyes wild, his hair disheveled. Get out, he yelled. I told security to bar you from the building. They work for me now, Marcus, I said, closing the door behind me. Hemlock stood by the door, a silent sentinel. Marcus stood up, swaying slightly. You think you've won? You haven't won anything. You don't know about Project Hydra. You don't know where the bodies are buried. Without me, this company sinks in 6 months, and your inheritance is worth 0. Ah yes, Project Hydra, I said, pulling a slim manila folder from my briefcase. Hemlock had given it to me that morning. It was Arthur's final compilation of evidence. The offshore shell companies, the falsified R&D reports hide the $40 million loss. Arthur knew all about it. Marcus went chalk white. He sank back into the chair. He knew, I continued, walking toward the desk, and he left the proof to me. Which brings us to the terms of your stipend. I opened the folder and placed a single sheet of paper in front of him. The clause stated you must remain employed in a capacity deemed useful by the board and avoid scandal, I recited. Corporate fraud and embezzling $40 million is quite scandalous, Marcus. He looked up at me, his blue eyes filled with tears. It wasn't sorrow. It was the terrifying realization that the safety net was gone. Eleanor, please, if you release this, I'll go to prison. I'll have nothing. I looked around the office. I remembered bringing Arthur lunch here years ago, watching him build this empire with hard work and honesty, only for his son to treat it like a personal ATM to impress a 20-year-old girl. You wanted a fresh start, Marcus? I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. You wanted to be free of history. Well, congratulations. You're free. I pressed the intercom button on the desk. Mrs. Gable? Please send in security to escort Mr. Sterling from the building. And call the SEC. Tell them we need to self-report an accounting irregularity. I took the CEO chair, Arthur's chair, and turned it to face the window, looking out over the city he had built. I didn't watch Marcus get dragged out of his office, crying and begging. I had too much work to do. Epilogue. 6 months later. The annual Sterling Corp Gala was held in the same ballroom, but the atmosphere was entirely different. The tension was gone, replaced by a cautious optimism. I stood near the entrance, wearing a deep emerald gown that was neither matronly nor desperate. It was just me. I wasn't the CEO. I was smart enough to know what I didn't know. I had hired a brilliant female CEO, a woman in her 50s who had been overlooked for promotions for years, to run the day-to-day operations. I took the role of chairwoman of the board, focusing on the company's culture and managing the charitable foundations Arthur loved. I was busy, I was stressed, and I had never been happier. Champagne, Mrs. Sterling? I turned to see a waiter holding a tray. I took a glass with a smile. Thank you. As I scanned the room, I caught sight of Mrs. Gable. She gave me a subtle nod of approval. I thought about Marcus. The last I heard, the SEC investigation was ongoing. He was living in a small apartment in the suburbs, his assets frozen, trying to avoid indictment. Tiffany had tried to sell her story to a tabloid, but no one cared about the ex-girlfriend of a disgraced, broke junior executive. They were ghosts now, part of a history I no longer lived in. I raised my glass slightly toward the ceiling, toward the stars invisible beyond the city lights. To comfortable shoes, I whispered to Arthur. They get you where you need to go. I took a sip of champagne and walked into the crowd, not as an accessory, but as the main event. The end.